The seal bears the words Novus Ordo Seclorum, Latin for New Order of the Ages.
Do you have a feeling that there is sometimes an all-out war against science?
Oh, yeah. I mean, particularly over the last few years, there's an anti-authority feeling in the world. And science has an air of authority to it. So people who want to push back on authority tend to push back on science.
If Jesus wasn't real, Luciferians wouldn't be building their paradise on earth. Atheists would. If Jesus wasn't real, Luciferians wouldn't be passionately hating him to the point of keeping their existence hidden under penalties of torture and death. Lo and behold, in the 21st century, yes, if Jesus was a myth, Luciferians wouldn't be working overtime to inadvertently fulfill every prophecy that Jesus gave us. Can anybody read me? What part of Jesus foretold a worldwide cashless system, a worldwide government, and a worldwide religion do you not get? If Jesus wasn't real, why do former Satanists freely admit that only the true Christians are immune to witchcraft? They have no power over the disciples of Jesus. How is that possible? And what about this one that's been going around? If the Gospels were written by the Catholic Church in order to control people, then why didn't they include a pope in the scriptures? There's no pope here. Why didn't they include instructions to obey the priests? There's no priests in the New Testament, except for God himself and all his disciples. We're all priests. If the Gospels were an invention of the Catholic Church, why does Jesus say to call no man father?
I can't imagine what it would feel like to have my kids taken away from me. And as Prime Minister, I'm appalled by the shameful policy that stole Indigenous children from their communities. Our thoughts are with Te Kamloops, Te Secwépemc First Nation, and with all Indigenous communities across Canada. I want to talk about the heartbreaking news that 215 children were found buried at the former Kamloops residential school. 215 children. Think of their loving families that they were ripped away from. Think of the communities that never saw them again. Think of their hopes, their dreams, their potential, of all they would have accomplished, all they would have become. Sadly, this is not an exception or an isolated incident.
What about it?
We're not going to hide
What
from
are you
that.
doing about it? Are you still stuck on which phone you're going to upgrade to or what's for dinner? Why don't you leave your abode, your luxuries, and your loved ones and risk it all to go save some children yourself?
Most of all, they deserved to be safe. We have to acknowledge the truth. Residential schools were a reality, a tragedy that existed here in our country. And we have to own up to it. Kids were taken from their families, returned damaged.
Like I said, just waking up in the morning and knowing what day it is a testament to him. But if God was real, why wouldn't he just show himself? Show himself to who? To you? You can't even get on your knees and repent. You can't even hate sin and scream out to him. So why would he? But here's the craziest part about people who ask me why he doesn't just show himself the way they'd like him to. Their hearts have been so hardened that even if he did appear to them, in 2 weeks they would go back to being their old self, and he knows that. That's why. They might even forget it ever happened. Oh, that was just a crazy day. That was probably all in my head. Oh, how we love to make excuses. But if God was real, what about all the other gods? What other gods? Did Buddha perform a miracle for you? Did he affect a plethora of witnesses? Were his followers stoned to death, sawn in half, eaten alive? Did historians of his era leave any trace of him? Did he prophesy all the kingdoms that would appear on earth? And in what order? Laws of nature. While they glorify those laws, Christianity breaks those laws.
The simplest explanation of what the Rosicrucian order is that we're a philosophical and educational organization. And Rosicrucians are both men and women around the world, and we study topics that are related to natural laws, things that are just laws in the world that if we understand them better, we can live in harmony with them.
We certainly can trace our historical lineage back several hundred years, but then traditionally we also go back through, say, like the alchemists, the medieval mystics, back to the mystery schools of ancient Greece and Egypt. So this is called the primordial tradition, sort of like the underground stream of human spirituality. And we are a modern manifestation of that and historically connected to it. So it's really thousands of years old.
The Rosicrucian order can be traced back historically to the 1600s, when 3 Rosicrucian manifestos were published anonymously in Europe. However, they were perpetuating much older traditions, dating back to the mystery schools of ancient Egypt, the Essenes, the mysteries in Greece, such as the Delphic mysteries and Eleusis, Kabbalah, alchemy. So even though the Rosicrucian tradition was announced in the early 1600s, it was perpetuating something much older.
Well, mysticism is the practice by which one has a direct connection to the divine, however you conceive the divine to be, without intervention of priest or king or anybody else. So it actually is connected to the ancient mystery schools, which is ultimately the source of the Rosicrucian tradition. So a mystery, in the sense of mystery school, is not a whodunit. It's an occasion where one encounters the divine.
For me, mysticism means that one has a direct understanding, a communication, engagement with the divine or God or whatever term one uses for that great spirit.
The Rosicrucian studies, as well as things that come out of these traditions, really do provide a manual. You don't have to believe it. That's the beauty of it. Beliefs are relatively arbitrary, depending on what you've been exposed to, maybe what you believe. But you can test these things, and you begin to see there is order to the human experience of life, just as there is to the material aspect of life.
But Christian testimony simply outclips the rest.
This particular critic that I've been reading said, well, that doesn't differentiate Christ much from a whole sequence of dying and resurrecting mythological gods. And of course, people have made that claim in comparative religion. Joseph Campbell did that, and Jung to a lesser degree, I would say, but Campbell did that. But the difference, and C.S. Lewis pointed this out as well, the difference between those mythological gods and Christ was that there's a representation of, there's a historical representation of his existence as well. Now you can debate whether or not that's genuine. You can debate about whether or not he actually lived and whether there's credible objective evidence for that, but it doesn't matter in some sense because this, well, it does, but there's a sense in which it doesn't matter because there's still a historical story. And so what you have in the figure of Christ is an actual person who actually lived, plus a myth. And in some sense, Christ is the union of those two things. The problem is I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief, and I don't understand it. Because I've seen sometimes.
But Christian testimony simply outclips the rest.
The objective world and the narrative world touch. That's Jungian synchronicity. And I've seen that many times in my own life.
But Christian testimony simply outclips the rest.
And so in some sense, I believe it's undeniable. You know, we have a narrative sense of the world. For me, that's been the world of morality. That's the world that tells us how to act. It's real. Like, we treat it like it's real. It's not the objective world. But the narrative and the objective world touch. And the ultimate example of that, in principle, is supposed to be Christ. But I don't know what to... that seems to me oddly plausible.
Yeah.
But I still don't know what to make of it. It's too... partly because it's too terrifying a reality to fully believe. I don't even know what would happen to you if you fully believed it.
If you believed in the story of Christ, or if you believed that history...
But Christian testimony simply outclips the rest.